2022 was one of the biggest years in space exploration. The James Webb Space Telescope was deployed and has sent back stunning images of the universe. It also saw a successful uncrewed test mission back to the moon, the first of the Orion flights. Just two highlights from last year. Here's a preview of plans for 2023.
3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff.
It's set to be an unprecedented year for private and commercial space missions. A couple of different firms working with NASA, for instance, will be putting landers down on the surface of the moon in the next few months. Some of the research they'll conduct will pave the way for future manned missions to our nearest celestial neighbor. And aerospace manufacturer Boeing looks set to finally begin shuttling astronauts back and forth to the International Space Station with its Starliner. The spacecraft passed muster on an uncrewed flight to the ISS in 2022. Rival SpaceX has been carrying astronauts up to the station since 2020 in its Crew Dragon spacecraft. In 2023, it's planning to send 4 space tourists on a mission called Polaris Dawn. That's slated to last at least 3 days and incorporate the first ever civilian spacewalk.
2 meters.
Down the road, another mission is planned with its Starship launch vehicle. Atop the company's Super Heavy booster, it'll be the most powerful rocket ever built. Moving farther out into space, we'll see the return in September of material from the asteroid Bennu. The round-trip Osiris-Rex spacecraft, which took samples from the surface of the near-Earth object, has taken 7 years to complete. A few weeks after the rubble from Bennu arrives back on Earth, NASA has penciled in the beginning of a trip to another asteroid. This time, one rich in metal. The mission will take the Psyche probe way out into the solar system to the asteroid belt. Far beyond the orbit of Mars, it will collect data on the super-heavy asteroid Psyche 16. And the European Space Agency is also breaking new ground in April with the launch of a trip to our solar system's largest planet. The Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer mission, or JUICE, will zero in on the gas giant and some of its frozen satellites after completing an 8-year journey to get there. An exciting year for space research in 2023.
Well, Luca Panettano is an Italian astronaut with the European Space Agency. 2023 sounds exciting. Anything you're excited about in particular?
Well, I am. I work for the Human Robotic Exploration Department Directorate here at ESA, and of course, what makes me excited is exploration. And one of the missions that your previous service showed, the JUICE mission, is incredibly exciting. I am also passionate about science fiction growing up, and so the idea of exploring the ice giants, Callisto, Europa, is exciting. But of course, I'm even more excited about human exploration, and so we have several things coming up this year for which I am obviously very excited.
The first civilian spacewalk could happen this year. You've spacewalked half a dozen times, I believe. What's it actually feel like?
It's hard to put into words because we don't have anything on Earth that compares really being weightless outside the space station or in a spacewalk. But the nicest comparison I can make is imagine being in the Red Sea and snorkeling and looking down and seeing, or in an aquarium and looking at those wonderful, colorful fish and environment, or actually scuba diving. The idea of being immersed in space, in a spacewalk, is a little bit like that, being fully immersed in this alien environment.
Except that, I guess with scuba diving, it's a case of just sort of coming back up to the surface at some stage. When you're in space, there's no way that you can take that helmet off, and you surely don't want to make any mistakes up there, do you, when you're outside of a space station?
No, that's why it takes hundreds and hundreds of hours of training to perform even one relatively simple spacewalk. And more complex spacewalks require hundreds of people training and preparing you for that specific task.
Can you also explain to us why this space race is back on again? Why so many companies and countries are so interested in outer space once again?
Absolutely. I think we are acquiring, finally, as humanity, we are acquiring understanding and awareness that space is not just a nice to have, but is a must have location for us to have resources in the future. What is important to understand is that nowadays we are not looking for another planet for us to live on. This is not in our plans as international agencies, but what we're looking at is a way to have access to new resources that are not available on our planet. We want to preserve our planet by utilizing resources that are basically infinite in the space around us. And nowadays, it's the time to take the steps to ensure that future. And it has to be a future where Europe is present. That's why the European Space Agency has a new class of astronauts. That's why we have so many missions coming up in exploration.
Some very interesting insights there from astronaut Luca Parmitano. Thank you very much for being on DW News.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And with me here in the studio is DW science correspondent Derek Williams. So 2023, a very exciting year. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, there were a lot of exciting missions. Those were only 5 or 6 that I introduced in the piece. But really, one of the most exciting missions, I think, personally, is this unmanned mission to Jupiter and its moons, which is going to be taking off next year. And it's going to take 8 years to get out there to explore Jupiter and these 3 icy moons. So it'll only arrive in 2031. I really hope I'm around when the data starts to come back on it, because if they're icy worlds, we're assuming that there's water there. And of course, water indicates, as far as we know, water would be a prerequisite for life. That's life as we know it is really, that's a prerequisite, is H2O. And so if we get out there, there is a possibility that they might actually discover indicators that there is life on the moons of Jupiter. So really, really exciting stuff. There's also these manned missions, the Polaris Dawn mission, which is coming up, which is the first time that civilians are going to be on this particular flight that's going to be orbiting for they estimate 3 to 5 days. There'll be a civilian spacewalk, so lots going on.
Space activities seem to be picking up steam. Is that true?
Yeah, they really are. For example, if you just look at, there are reasons for that. For example, launch payloads have gotten much cheaper as we've developed satellite technology, because we're sending so many satellites up into space. We've managed to streamline that, and streamlining that has made it more common. And the innovation is really picking up speed. Of course, the next step would be to get away from doing manufacturing with materials down here on Earth and boosting stuff up out of the Earth's gravity well, and instead starting to mine these resources, which are practically really infinite in space, as long as we can get to them. And so that'll be the next step.
How about the commercialization of space? Companies like SpaceX, for example, how are they changing the game?
Well, they're changing the game really quite dramatically. I'm not a big fan of unbridled capitalism in general, particularly when it comes to things like, for example, healthcare. But I think when it comes to space innovation, it's really going to drive innovation in a big way. As I mentioned, cheapening what it costs to boost something up out of the Earth's gravity well has made it easier and faster for us to develop things in general. But of course, it leads to problems. On the one hand, for example, being able to boost things cheaply up from the surface of the Earth means that we can resupply, for example, the International Space Station more easily. But on the other hand, it makes it cheaper to boost satellites up, and so we're having thousands of them, which represent a danger to the ISS. So there are both sides of the coin, and we really are, I think, in the long run, going to need more international space regulation. We kind of actually need it already.
Derek Williams, thank you so much.